Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Enterprise Mobility Insights Outlook podcast. I'm Gina Daniel Lee, Vice President, Strategic Alliances and Partnerships here at Stratix. Today, we're talking about shared mobile devices and the challenges and/or rewards that they provide to enterprise customers. There is no one better to discuss this topic with than Brett Cooper, partner at BlueFletch and a longtime Stratix friend and partner. Welcome back to the podcast, Brett.
Thanks, Gina. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
About me, been working at BlueFletch for about 15 years now. I've been known Stratix for almost a dozen, so it's been a pleasure working with you guys. Personally, like solving problems. Got two kids, like being outside hiking, so been doing a lot of hiking this summer. Loving it.
Good stuff. And you just recently moved to Colorado too, right? So there's a lot of good hiking there.
And a lot of sunshine. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for the opening. So tell me, why is shared devices amongst employees a benefit?
Yeah, I think we've seen this paradigm for the last 20 years, or at least me personally, working across a bunch of different mobility companies. But the shared device model is really, if you think of the shift workers, where you have somebody comes in the morning, will take a device, use it. The guy in the next shift in the afternoon uses it. The guy in the evening uses it, or it could be shifts throughout the week. But the value is instead of having to buy 3x the number of devices, if you sign an individual device as a company, you could have less devices, and you could have dedicated devices specific to those roles and jobs. So I think the big benefit is less devices, fewer devices to sign or purchase, but also you're managing fewer devices, so there's a lot less complexity around the overall management landscape of that.
That makes sense. And, there are those that believe that implementing a BYOD policy would just be cheaper. Why is that not necessarily the case?
It's a good question. I think there's a couple aspects of BYOD. One is when you think of the devices across people's pockets, it is there's a lot of difference in what you'd see in a warehouse versus a office versus, working for, an airline. And if you're going to have to manage and support all of those different types of devices, the cost of actually managing those can get pretty expensive pretty fast. When you think of an application regression test, if you application regression test on one device, it's going to take you 2 days. But if you have to do it on 20 devices, it's going to take you 40 days. So there's a lot of hidden costs there that people don't really think about. The other aspect is we've started to see more of this is around certain regulatory laws around what companies are required to assign people. So if you're giving a device to somebody versus using their own, what do you have to pay them for that? How does data plan costs work and those types of things? So there's for the regulatory side, it gets a little complex. But for me, when I think about managing devices, it really comes down to the overall just cost and landscape of having, if you have to manage 40 devices, it gets really, really expensive fast with the testing, regression, and just validation as things get out there.
And you and I have worked on a lot of projects over the years, and we've had these conversations around consumer versus rugged. What's your experience there?
Consumer versus rugged, it's definitely a debate. A lot of people want to go with a less expensive consumer device, which makes sense. And I think about it in a model of like, how long do you plan on consuming the device for? What is the device cycle? So a consumer device, I think some of the drawbacks you're going to have with things like you don't get replaceable batteries. They're not as rugged. They don't include a lot of the peripherals. So I think Zebra or Honeywell have incredible scan engines, their devices, and a lot of the other rugged devices have that. So you lose out on that. But there's also this other aspect around the device management capabilities. So consumer devices are typically designed with consumer protection, data protection in place, and they don't have things around enterprise management. Zebra was probably one of the first to introduce this, and Honeywell and some of the other manufacturers have done a great job of building EMDKs for companies like BlueFletch and a lot of the other security and management tools that we're able to tie into to support those devices. So for me, when I think about the cost of the device, consumer is way cheaper. Rugged is just going to be, it's going to be a lot more expensive. But if you need those advanced capabilities, the multi-cycle, it's going to give you that benefit. And the other thing we found too is just the replacement cost. And Stratix probably has a lot better numbers than I have on this, but just ancillarily, when I go talk to customers, if they're using a iPhone, their replacement repair costs are typically a lot higher than if they purchased a a Zebra device or a Honeywell rugged device. So that cost, if you look at over a 4-year period, it can be a lot more than than the cost difference of the actual devices themselves. So I think the costing and then the management tools are really the two areas to look at for me but you got to look at it over multiple years.
That's some good insight. And sometimes shared device programs actually get a bad rap, though. Why is that?
I think a lot of it comes down to how people set things up and manage it. One of the tools that we sell and support is specifically designed to improve the experience for users on shared devices. I think a lot of the if you put a device in kiosk and then users have to go log in to 20 apps during the day, it's a pretty bad experience. Whereas on a personal carry device, you logged in once, you're always able to use things like face rec on a personal carry device. Whereas a shared device, a lot of those capabilities with the MDMs out of the box, you're not going to get unless you have a tool like BlueFletch or another tool that supports that user experience.
And one of the challenges could also be the user experience, right? Like you mentioned. How can we make that better?
Yeah, I think the things we look at from our side are there's a couple areas. One is just reducing things they have to do over and over again. So the first area we really attack is we provide single sign-on capabilities. So instead of having to type in your password 8 to 10 times a day, type in it once at the beginning of your shift. We support things like face reauth and NFC reauth, so like fast reauthentication. So how do employees get to what they want as quickly as they can? The second piece is we think about it as contextually driving what happens. So we really think about a role-based experience. So as a manager of a store, I'm going to have a different experience than the guy who works in receiving. Again, receiving wants to be able to get to his return app, his inbound app, and his outbound apps as quickly as possible. The store manager wants to be able to see scheduling. He wants to see HR. He wants to see a lot of his overhead apps. And for us, anytime a user picks up a device, it can be an identical device, but we really think about how do we make that device specific to that user without them having to go and hunt and find the things they need to be productive during their work day.
True. So there's a lot of discussion today around security, right? How does a strong endpoint management platform help with security?
I think the best advice I always give people around security is it's the onion model. You think about there's no one tool that's going to solve everything. From a device standpoint, there's a couple aspects. At the low level, it's really understanding the security controls to put on the device. If it's a Honeywell or Zebra device, understand the things they use to protect that. Samsung has their Knox program has some good settings around security. Google Play has started introducing some things at the OS level. So they have Play Store security. So it'll scan apps on your device and try to prevent viruses. And then above that, you want to start thinking about things like the settings on the device. How do you control specific settings around USB cable connections, network connections, Bluetooth, and accessory connections to control what the users can get to and prevent malicious data getting on your devices or enterprise data getting off. And then the layer above that is really the experience layers where we have a lot of controls around that. Is how do we think about what you expose to the user? What apps do they really need to get to on their work device versus do they not need to get to? And that's really where we control. So it's multi-layer. And then around that, you have your overall just network controls. So if the device is on a network, you're going to have your firewalls, things around it. If it goes off network, you have conditional access control policies. You can support those through identity providers. So there's a plethora of things you can do, but it's really at each of those layers, you have to look at it, identify how to have your best security posture, which maps up to the experience you want for your users. So that's if you ask the security guys how to make a device secure, they're going to tell you put it in a safe and have one person in the warehouse be able to take it out. But the ops guys will always say, we want our devices to be in the hands of users and being used as much as possible. So it's really finding that the balance between those two aspects.
I agree. So we've talked a lot about the pros and cons of shared devices, but at the end of the day, why implement a shared device program?
Yeah, I think that the biggest ones really go back to the looking at your business model. So if you're running multi-shifts and you have users, so a warehouse is a great example of this. Most warehouses run 2-3 shifts a day. their workers come in and out. I think warehouse turnover, I can't remember the stat, but I think in 2021, it was around 53% was BLS. And I've talked to the labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. I've talked to some companies where it's way higher than that, where their typical tenure is going to be 2 months. And then during peak season, I've seen some of our customers that run distribution will be, so that peak, for retail is going to be the November through January. They actually triple their staff, and it's just for those 2 months. So when you think about the having a individual device assigned to people versus having shared devices, it's a lot easier to manage the shared devices in a situation where you have that contingent labor or multiple people coming through. So really, it's looking at your business model and trying to line up your device model to that. And, the exact opposite would be, I think that you guys do some work with airlines, but on the airline side, flight attendants will typically be with the airline for 2+ years, and they're not, they're running one shift a day, and they're limited by FAA rules. So that's a good scenario where a dedicated device works well versus a shared device model. So it's really looking at your business model and then trying to line it up to the needs and of what your devices have to do.
That's a really good insight, Brett. Thank you for that. If you remember the last time that you were here, we like to end the podcast with a few rapid fire questions. Are you game?
I am. I think I got it wrong last time, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, now you have a chance to redeem yourself.
Yeah.
How do you prefer to start your day?
I'm an early riser, so I'm up about 4:45. Try to get in the gym between 5:30, and then I'm typically on call. So I try to sweat a lot before work. That way I'm not sweating on calls.
Love it. That's a great answer. What's one productivity tool that you couldn't live without?
I love note taking. I've been a super strong note taker. I started out the notebooks, and then around 2007, I switched over to Evernote and used that up until recently, and switched over to newer note taking app called Joplin. But having something where I'm able to constantly take notes and have that searchable, indexable, and findable just makes my life so much easier. So if you're using I think the three big ones are OneNote, Evernote, and then now Joplin's big on the scene too.
I agree with you. I leverage that too, and it gives you a whole new perspective and world, right?
Yeah.
If you had a magic button on your desk that could bring you anything you wanted, what would you summon?
I like coffee, so it'd be a coffee button. Although it might kill my blood pressure. My blood pressure probably be through the roof. I think having to walk somewhere and get a coffee is actually good for you. But I do it. I'd love to have a button, just press it and have a little cappuccino appear.
Love it. That's great. Brad, it's been great having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you'll come back.
Excellent, Gina. Thank you very much. I appreciate it as always.
Great. And listeners, if you like what you heard and would like more information, or would like to sign up for future episodes, please visit stratixcorp.com/podcast to subscribe. We'd also love it if you'd rate and leave a review for any podcast that you've listened to, or any suggestions for future topics you would like us to explore. I'll look forward to next time. Goodbye.